Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, soldiers patrol Zimbabwe's streets ahead of anti-government protests planned for Friday. There's been growing frustration about the leadership of President Emmerson Mnangagwa, who took over in 2017, as well as allegations of growing repression. Also, sexual abuse allegations in Cameroon's Karate Federation upend the discipline. The case implicates the main leaders of the organisation. Our correspondents speak to some of the alleged victims of harassment. And we meet one Kenyan athlete who's still training hard despite the restrictions caused by coronavirus. The 1,500 metres world champion is still hoping to return to the competition. But first, soldiers and police were sent out onto Zimbabwe's streets on Thursday ahead of anti-government protests that are planned for Friday. The rallies have been banned, with the government labelling the demonstrations a violent uprising. Earlier this week, the ruling party, ZANU-PF, accused the US of sponsoring the protests. There's been growing frustration in the country about the leadership of President Emmerson Mnangagwa, who took over from longtime leader Robert Mugabe following a 2017 coup. Many Zimbabweans say that they're worse off now than ever and complain of heightened repression. Last week, a well-known journalist and critic of Mnangagwa was arrested and charged with inciting violence over his calls for the July 31st protest. Our correspondents have the story.
Hopewell Chinono live-streamed his arrest, trying to draw attention to his fate. 10 or so men burst into his house by force and told him to put the phone down. Since then, he's stayed behind bars, charged with inciting violence, having called for protests against the government. He risks 5 years inside. With mass protests planned on July 31st, the government is keen to avoid further public unrest.
What we are dealing with in this country is people that threatened that there will be a new government come 1 August. A new government which is not based on our own constitutional process. Our country is a nation and it has got security concerns. It would be nice for every country out there to mind their own business and respect Zimbabwe's internal affairs.
The second part of his message there clearly addressed at the US. This week, Zimbabwe's ruling party branded Washington's ambassador a thug and threatened his expulsion. Many Zimbabweans are denouncing the growing oppression. Around 60 activists have been arrested since January. These women were reportedly kidnapped, tortured and sexually assaulted back in May. Opposition figures are saying enough is enough.
Zimbabwe has become a hotspot of human rights abuses and crimes against humanity.
Images of incidents of police brutality and apparent arbitrary arrests have flooded Zimbabwean social media. Little appears to have changed since the time of Mugabe.
It's not a new thing. It has always been there in Zimbabwe. Abductions have been recorded in their numbers. But what we see now is government taking advantage of the COVID-19 lockdown. People are not in the streets. Therefore, the government is maneuvering, using that opportunity to lock down rights.
Because of restrictions on movement put in place to control the spread of COVID-19, Zimbabweans do not officially have the right to gather and protest. But anger on the streets is such that July 31st could be a major event.
Well, the WHO is worried that the pace at which coronavirus is spreading in Africa could still be picking up. The humanitarian organisation, the International Rescue Committee, has said that it fears the true number of cases may be underreported because of a lack of testing and data from the continent. However, Africa currently has logged a relatively small proportion of global infections, around 892,000 cases out of a world total of over 17 million. The WHO has acknowledged that the coronavirus figures for Africa could be higher than tracked, but says it does not think that massive underestimation is a problem. It's still pushing for testing programs to be ramped up.
We keep saying we do not think there is a hugely underestimated situation, and we particularly don't think there are, thousands of people dying on the continent undetected. We need to get the testing up in African countries. We need to increase the testing, and we'll be convinced that we are seeing the correct situation when we see high rates of testing with the positivity at around 5%. This is the case now in relatively few countries. So there's still a lot of work to do to scale up the testing and appreciate the true situation.
A Moroccan investigative journalist has been detained and is facing charges of rape and receiving foreign funds to undermine state security. Omar Radi had been questioned by police several times prior to being arrested, and rights groups have recently accused Moroccan authorities of trying to intimidate him because of his reporting on corruption. He's dismissed the charges as ridiculous and says that they're in retaliation for a report from Amnesty International that was released back in June, in which it was alleged that spyware had been put on Radi's phone. Ivory Coast's defence minister has been named as Prime Minister. Hamed Bakayoko had been acting premier since his predecessor suddenly died earlier this month. Amadou Gon Coulibaly passed away from a heart attack on July the 8th, throwing Ivory Coast's political landscape into uncertainty. He'd been the ruling party's candidate in upcoming elections. Bakayoko is close to President Alassane Ouattara, who was formally asked by his party to run for a third term on Wednesday. He's said that he won't give his decision as to whether he'll accept the candidacy until after an extended mourning period for Gon Coulibaly. Well, sexual abuse allegations in Cameroon's Karate Federation has been making headlines in the country. The case implicates the main leaders of the organisation. Our correspondents report.
He got up. He tried to lock the door. That's when he tried to hug me, grab me. I was upset, embarrassed by everything.
Still traumatized, this 19-year-old prefers to remain anonymous while recounting how her coach sexually harassed her. At the time, she was a member of the Cameroon Karate Federation's female team. She says she resisted her trainer's advances 2 years ago.
Because I refused to give in, he put me aside. That is after I got a message telling me, I warned you. All I want now is justice.
In incidents that date back to 2012, altogether 5 young women say they were sexually harassed by their karate coaches. All want to remain anonymous. This law professor, who also practices karate, helped uncover the scandal. After raising the alarm, an association of black karateka's asked him to head up an internal investigation. In a report released this month, he accuses senior officials of the country's Karate Federation of turning a blind eye to sexual assault.
These accusations are the result of a stalemate. Sexual violence is an ongoing phenomenon in the karate discipline in Cameroon. But over the years, the phenomenon has grown, and it's become a normal practice.
Master Emmanuel Wakam, the man who has led the Karate Federation for a decade, is the main focus of these abuse allegations. 2 athletes have accused him of attempted rape and sexual harassment. He's denied the claims.
I will never commit these heinous acts that destroy humankind.
Emmanuel Wakam declined our request for an interview. He has filed a claim for defamation against his alleged victims. Meanwhile, findings from the Federation's internal investigation have been submitted to a separate judicial inquiry, and its outcome will affect whether any formal abuse charges are eventually brought.
Well, Kenyan track champion Timothy Cheruyuiyot hasn't slacked off training despite the disruption caused to his sport by the pandemic. The 1,500 metres world champion is hoping to return to competitive running at the Diamond League meetings set to resume on August the 14th in 2020 in Monaco.
Back on the racing track after 3 months on the sidelines. A moment that Timothy Cheruyuiyot had been waiting for since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic.
I miss racing. Always contacting with friends at abroad, running together, having fun outside. So it was a lot of challenges.
The young Kenyan was crowned 1,500 meters world champion last year at only 23 years old. But his promising career was halted in its tracks by the COVID-19 crisis, which led to the cancellation of all major sporting events, including the Tokyo Olympics. Cheruyuiyot has now resumed training and is ready to compete again, but he may have to show some more patience, with the 2020 sporting schedule still shrouded in uncertainty.
So far, there are about 5 events on standby, but there are chances and possibilities of them picking up, and again, there are high chances equally of them being cancelled.
For now, the young athlete is fully focused on his physical preparation ahead of the next major event, the Diamond League, which should be held in Monaco on August 14th.
And Senegalese singer Bala Sidibe, founding member of the legendary Orchestra Baobab, died in Dakar this week. Orchestra Baobab's blend of Cuban rhythms, soul and jazz, along with traditional sounds drawn from across the continent, made them one of the most successful groups of the 1970s. Sidibe was 78 and reportedly died in his sleep after a very full day of rehearsals with his musical comrades. So we'll leave you with the sounds of what he loved. Thanks for joining us. Do so again.